Imagine waking up one day and finding out you owe over $100,000 and you didn't even spend it. That's exactly what every American, man, woman and child technically owes today. Not to a bank, not to a loan shark, but to their own government. The US national debt has crossed $36 trillion in 2024. That's more than the entire US economy, more than the GDP, more than all the money flowing through businesses, paychecks and trade in a single year. So how did we get here? Why is this number growing? And most importantly, does it really matter? Let's start small. You've got a monthly income, say $4,000, you plan to spend $3,500. That's good. You're left with savings, called a budget surplus. Now imagine you spend $4,500 instead. You've gone over. That's a budget deficit. You cover the gap with a credit card. It adds interest. It builds up. That's your personal budget. Now zoom out. The federal government operates the same way, but on a massive scale. In fiscal year 2023, the US collected about $4.5 trillion in revenue. Sounds like a lot? It is. But we spent over $6.2 trillion. That's a $1.7 trillion deficit in just 1 year. So how do we cover that? The same way you would. We borrow. The US borrows by selling Treasury securities, fancy government IOUs. These come in the form of bills, notes and bonds. When investors, like banks, pension funds, even countries like Japan and China buy them, they're lending money to the US government. In return, the government promises to pay back the money with interest. As of 2024, Japan holds around $1.1 trillion in US debt. China follows closely with just under $860 billion. Now here's the problem. Debt isn't free. In 2023, the US paid nearly $875 billion just in interest on its national debt. That's more than the country spent on Medicaid. It's almost as much as the entire defense budget. And here's the kicker. It doesn't reduce the debt. It just keeps the balance from exploding faster. Like paying the minimum on your credit card every month while the interest piles up. If this sounds crazy, you're not alone. So why does the government keep doing it? The answer is both political and practical. Politicians don't like raising taxes. It's unpopular. Cutting spending? Also unpopular. And sometimes spending is needed, like during a recession, a pandemic, or for military support abroad. In 2020, during the COVID-19 crisis, the US passed over $5 trillion in emergency relief across multiple packages. It helped avoid economic collapse, but added a mountain of new debt. In the short term, this kind of deficit spending can stabilize the economy. But if it becomes the norm, it's like using duct tape to hold a car together. Sooner or later, it breaks. This brings us to the question no one wants to answer. How much debt is too much? The key metric experts use is the debt-to-GDP ratio. This compares how much a country owes versus how much it produces in a year. In 2024, the US debt-to-GDP ratio sits around 122%. To put that in perspective, during World War II, at the peak of wartime spending, it reached 106%. And while countries like Japan have higher ratios, they also have a more homogeneous creditor base, persistent deflation, and a stronger culture of domestic saving. The US doesn't. If our debt continues to rise while GDP slows, it sends a signal to investors. This economy might not be able to pay its bills. That could lead to rising interest rates, currency devaluation, or in worst-case scenarios, default. This isn't theory. We've seen the consequences play out. In Greece in 2010, excessive borrowing and cooking the books led to a full-blown sovereign debt crisis. Result: 25% unemployment and strict IMF bailouts. Argentina has defaulted 9 times since gaining independence. In 2020, it restructured over 65 billion in debt. Sri Lanka, in 2022, couldn't even afford fuel imports. Protests toppled the government. And though the US is far more stable, the warning signs are there. If investors lose faith in US bonds, even briefly, interest rates would spike, and borrowing would become dangerously expensive. There are 2 real ways to reduce debt. 1. Run budget surpluses. This means spending less than what the government collects. It happened once recently, under President Bill Clinton in the late 1990s, when a tech boom increased tax revenue. For 4 years, the US ran a surplus and even paid down some debt. 2. Grow the economy faster than debt. If GDP expands rapidly, the debt becomes a smaller percentage of it. This happened after World War II, when post-war industrial growth outpaced the accumulated debt. But today, with rising interest payments, sluggish growth, and demographic headwinds, that's a much harder formula. You might be thinking, why should I care? Here's why. National debt affects your taxes. It can impact inflation, driving up food, rent, and gas prices. It influences mortgage rates, student loans, and credit cards. And it decides how much money the government has for public services, from highways to hospitals. If debt keeps rising, future generations may be forced to choose between paying higher taxes, accepting fewer services, or watching their standard of living decline. National debt isn't just a number on a government ledger. It's a reflection of choices made over decades. Wars we didn't fully pay for, tax cuts with no offsetting spending cuts, bailouts, stimulus checks, and political gridlock. Every time we run a deficit, we borrow from the future to pay for the present. The bill may not be due tomorrow, but someday someone's going to have to pay it. The question is, will we deal with it while we still have the choice? Or will we wait until the debt decides for us? Because at the end of the day, debt isn't just money owed, it's freedom mortgaged.